Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking about the Miami Hurricanes and their chances to win the ACC and their chances to compete in the college football playoff. And I am joined by Alex Donno, who is the host of the Locked On Hurricanes podcast and the Locked On ACC podcast. And he also does some post-game work covering Miami football too. And Alex, Miami had a statement win to start off the season on Sunday night. It was very kind of, eye-opening to me, and I think the rest of the college football world, that Notre Dame, which was this team that went on a run in the college football playoff last year, mostly because they were winning at the line of scrimmage and they're pushing around Georgia, they're pushing around Penn State, they're pushing around Indiana, that they go into opening week with most of those same guys and they play Miami, and Notre Dame got pushed around. Was this something that was a little bit shocking to you, that, that they were dominating on both lines of scrimmage?
Yeah, the way that I've been saying it since that win, James, and thank you for having me. It's always great to be here. Is that was really a validation of everything I saw from Miami in training camp, spring practice, the way they've been building their roster. I still had to see it to believe it because I had and still have a ton of respect for Notre Dame. I mean, like you mentioned, that team got to the national championship game last year by virtue of winning the turnover margin, which Miami was able to win on Sunday. Notre Dame was plus 18 in the turnover margin last year. Notre Dame would consistently win at the line of scrimmage and win with their ground game. So very impressive that Miami was, able to hold Jeremiah Love to 33 rushing yards, and the combination of Love and Jadarian Price, they held to 78 combined yards. So it was one of those things, like I had to see it to believe it. And I think it's a validation and a testament to the way Miami's roster has been built, over the course of the past three and a half off seasons. Right, the way that they have recruited, especially on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, they have like a Big Ten or upper echelon SEC type of line of scrimmage presence, and then of course you had some playmakers obviously stepping up. Malachi Toney, true freshman receiver who's 17 years old, had the big game with the 82 yards and the touchdown. Your very experienced receiver, C.J. Daniels, who's a 6-year senior, made that ridiculous one-handed touchdown grab. And then I thought the experience of Carson Beck was super important. Miami, I don't think they win that game with a less experienced quarterback, because he was able to really take what was there against an excellent Notre Dame secondary. Sometimes that involved checkdowns and low risk throws, taking care of the football, didn't throw any interceptions in the game, hit a few big plays, but, leaned on his running game and on his defense when he had to. So I thought it was, a very composed performance and a very physical performance. So, Miami's got a lot of work to do, but that, like you said at the top, James, that was a statement win.
Last year, when we talked before the season, we were pretty optimistic about Miami. We thought some of the transfer portal additions, specifically Cam Ward, was going to be a splash. I think the season kind of broke Miami's way last year too. And then just looking on the surface of this team this year, it's like, all right, you're probably going to have a downgrade. This isn't an insult to Carson Beck, but Cam Ward was a Heisman Trophy candidate. He was the first pick of the draft, so you're going to think a little bit of a downgrade there. Some new receivers are going to be put into this team. The defense was not that good last year. How much is that going to be improved this year? So I kind of thought that Miami was still going to be, a team that was going to be a top 25 team flirting with a playoff bid. But the way that they looked on Saturday, this looks like a legit top 10 team. How optimistic are you kind of thinking and projecting Miami heading into the rest of this year now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's a more balanced team than last season. I mean, Cam Ward, and not taking anything away from Carson Beck, but Cam Ward was just like a generational special type of talent, and really the defense let him down. I mean, there's this, he would be putting up points in the 30s and the 40s, and sometimes that wasn't enough. Whereas this year there's a lot more balance. Like in terms of possible top 10 college football playoff, I think certainly making the college football playoff even before the Notre Dame game was kind of the expectation, or at least the goal for a lot of Miami fans. The schedule still the rest of the way, I argue it's tougher than Miami's schedule from last year. So like nothing is automatic. And I just, before I hopped on with you, I was just on conference call with the media and Carson Beck and a few other players, and a couple quotes from Carson that stood out to me, when he was asked about how do you avoid becoming complacent? And he mentioned humility is always a week away, right? That you get a big win, but that doesn't mean that the upcoming wins are guaranteed. I mean, I guess the next game feels kind of like a guaranteed win against Bethune-Cookman, but other than that, Miami still has a Florida team that's going to come to South Florida in a couple weeks. I think Florida is better than they were certainly better than they were at the early part of last season. They finished the year
Yep.
strong last year. And, after Florida, Miami's got a bye week, and then they play Florida State, who looks heads and shoulders better than they were last year. We just saw them out muscle and run all over Alabama, and Miami's got to go to Tallahassee to play them. Miami has to go later this year to Dallas to play SMU, who had a good season and played in the college football playoff. They got blown out, but they got there, and they got to the ACC championship game. So I think the schedule is tougher than it was last year. So even after beating Notre Dame, James, nothing is guaranteed. But obviously they just passed, arguably, if you just go by rankings and preseason expectations, they passed the biggest test on their schedule already. So I think it's a good sign, hopefully, for things to come. But Miami has to learn how to finish out seasons because, last year they started 9-0 before losing two of their final three regular season games, and 3 out of the final 4 overall, including the Pop-Tarts Bowl that Iowa State, your guys, beat Miami in. So they've got to finish, but I think they have the team that they can do it this year.
That's a really good point about complacency, because I think that's definitely something that happened to you guys last year where, there's a benefit of having an easy schedule where you do get to play, lesser competition, but there is times that you get to overlook your opponents. And that's usually where we see like the biggest upsets of the year where you're like, there's no way that, this 28-point favorite's going to lose this game. And then all of a sudden they do, for example, I think that was a little thing with Florida State, Alabama in week 1. You mentioned Carson Beck a little bit earlier on, and he was, it was very noticeable just watching him play on Sunday night, and just kind of the just night and day difference between his time at Georgia and his time at Miami. Because you could just see he just had an energy to him. He had a confidence to him. And he even talked about it, in the post game, talking about how he's fallen in love with football again. Can you talk to me a little bit about like some things that you've learned about him that you didn't know about him before you started covering him?
Yeah, so before I started covering him, I had heard so much of like the sour grapes from people who cover Georgia and fans of Georgia. Like I went into Carson Beck with an open mind, but it's hard to not hear those things and kind of let it poison the well a little bit. So like I guess my concern was, does this guy is he fully dedicated to the game? Is he a real leader? But the actual impressions I've had on him, and I saw him around the team during spring football, where he actually during spring football he wasn't fully recovered yet from his elbow surgery, so he was out there, but he wasn't able to throw, so he was doing other drills and mental reps and stuff. But he looked fully engaged in the spring. Then I finally had a chance to meet him and talk to him in mid-July, and quite frankly, I was blown away. Like you can just tell chatting with him that the football IQ is very high, and he can like recall things. When you start to talk about like specific games and moments he had in Georgia, he can like recall formations he was going up against and like little intricacies of the plays where I think he's got like a little bit of a photographic memory thing going on, which is probably a good trait to have as a quarterback. And from everything that I hear and I've heard from Miami's coaches, he's a film junkie. And, from the observations that I've had being able to cover some training camp practices before the season started, again, obviously you can see the arm is fully recovered from the elbow surgery and all that, but even like little things he was doing between plays, where he was kind of going over routes with his receivers and going over things with the backup quarterbacks. Like, I mean, I don't know what was going on at Georgia or how much of this is like Georgia fans just kind of, reinventing history just to make themselves feel better, but I don't know what it is. And again, like I'm not taking nothing against Georgia. I think that they're going to be one of the top teams in college football this year, but it's just weird some of the Beck narratives after he left it's been completely different from my experience covering him so far. And you know, and again, like he's not Cam Ward, but I think there are certain things that can make him maybe in certain ways an even better fit for this offense, where I think he's a little bit in situationally willing to take some checkdowns, whereas Ward was like always attacking down the field no matter the situation. So it's and again, like this could be good or bad depending on how you look at it, because Ward made some miraculous plays out of nothing, but I think maybe Beck is more adept to kind of take what's there, which could play out well in certain situations. So I mean, I think it's really important to have this guy because again, you know, Miami wasn't in the best quarterback situation after Ward's departure prior to adding Carson Beck, and I think he has the opportunity to remind people that he's one of the best in the country. And then you think about last thing I'll say about it, some of the things that didn't go his way at Georgia. A lot of it probably wasn't his fault. I mean, did he dip a little bit last year? Maybe. You know, maybe he wasn't in the best mental state, but his wide receiver core in Athens also led the nation in drops last year. And Georgia didn't have last year the running game that they historically have. I think they were 102nd in rushing offense last year, which is a strange dip for that program. So he didn't have the sort of help. And, you know, Miami's receivers certainly did a great job in the opening game. And we can certainly hope in South Florida that continues.
I wonder if some of the things with his time at Georgia was maybe just kind of like the program that Georgia has built, where it's like, hey, we won a national championship or back-to-back national championships with Stetson Bennett as our quarterback. So kind of if you're a quarterback, you're gonna have to fit in. We're not gonna fit to you. And that was kind of a very noticeable thing with Miami, where it was like, hey, we're gonna let you have a little bit of ownership of what certain plays that you want to run. On down to down situations that, you brought up discussing what type of routes he wants his receivers to run and what type of routes the receivers actually want to run. So it just seems like there's just a lot more just fluid communication with Beck and just the entire Miami offense, which kind of makes sense if that's, how productive they were last year. And it feels like they're just going to, keep going.
You bring up a fantastic point, because that to me, like my favorite thing about Miami's offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson is how much collaboration he allows with his quarterbacks and how much autonomy he gives to them. And like you mentioned, there's not like a one size fits all for Dawson's offense. He really puts an emphasis on not only calling plays but designing the offense into what his quarterbacks prefer, what they do well, avoiding the stuff that isn't as comfortable for them. Which to me, it's like that's a must for offensive coordinators, but some do it more than others, right? Especially at the college level. I think the fact that he puts that much trust and autonomy with his quarterbacks. And listen, when you go from a guy like Cam Ward to someone with the experience of Carson Beck, I think that's the right way to approach it. I think to be able to collaborate with your quarterback is something important.
You brought him up earlier, Malachi Tony, 17 years old, just kind of came out of nowhere, at least from my perspective, was an incredibly impactful receiver. And he wasn't just, a straight line guy. He was running like, double move routes. He was just getting open. Was this a surprise that he was going to be so impactful as a true freshman, or is this something that you kind of knew about heading into this game?
Yeah, I think this is something we kind of knew about. Although, like, I didn't expect him to have that good of a game against that specific defense. But Malachi Tony's ascension has been really remarkable. So he was certainly one of the best high school players in the state of Florida. And his story is pretty cool because he was obviously a standout receiver at American Heritage Plantation, where he played his high school ball. But then in the playoffs, his quarterback, who's a 5-star committed to Texas, is going to get to Texas next year. Dia Bell was injured, and so what do? They move Malachi Tony from receiver to quarterback, and he leads American Heritage to a state championship playing QB. So it goes to show like the versatility and the athleticism that he has. And then as soon as he actually, Tony, the other part of it is that, since he's only 17, that's because he reclassified. He was originally class of 2026, and he moved up to class of 2025. And so like the only like I just was kind of wondering, hey, like against Notre Dame is the guy who arrived early, but yeah, ever since he enrolled in Miami last spring, he's been a standout in practice. Like he had a really good spring game, and I think what really stands out, you mentioned the double moves. His polished route running for being so young, I think is like the big thing that really impresses his coaches. And like, to be able to earn the trust of your coaches to get a start at slot receiver in your opening game when there are more experienced slot receivers on Miami's roster. I mean, Tony Johnson, a transfer from Cincinnati, is a senior with a ton of experience. Ray Joseph is another slot receiver on Miami who's in his third year. And so for Malachi Tony to beat those guys out and get on the field from the first play, I think was really impressive. Like I can't say I was totally surprised by how well he played, but it's another thing. I said it at the top. Like I needed to see it to believe it. And if he played like that against Notre Dame, I can only imagine some of the other big games that Tony's about to have this year.
Maybe it's because I just had incredibly low expectations for the ACC headed into this year, and I know it's just week 1, but I'm pretty pleasantly surprised with how this conference is looking. Like I kind of thought Georgia Tech could handle Colorado, even though they had 3 turnovers in 8 minutes in that game. I thought Miami was going to be good. I thought Clemson was going to be good. I thought SMU would be decent. The Florida State thing obviously came out of nowhere, but now I'm just kind of looking at the ACC and I'm looking at the teams at the top of this conference. It feels like this could actually be in a 12-team playoff, a 3-bid league. Am I crazy for that?
I don't think you are. I think if Florida State and Miami both keep reinforcing what they showed us in week 1, because it's like, I'm obviously a little down on Clemson's opener, but like they got beaten by LSU by a touchdown. Like it's not a bad loss. And actually, Clemson got humiliated week 1 by Georgia last year and still turned their season around to win
And
the
LSU
ACC and
might
get to
very
the
well be
college
the best
football.
team in the SEC too.
They might be. They might be. So it's like, it's a little disappointed in Clemson because they were favored at home and they lost. But at the same time, it's like they can absolutely bounce back and, win the conference or get to the conference championship game. And then, Miami versus Florida State. I mean, I don't want to overreact to one game, but they both looked really good. So I don't think you're crazy. And then, like, I don't know, should I be sleeping completely on SMU? I mean, they had an easy opener and they won 42-13. So we'll see more throughout the year. But yeah, I mean, I think to have a 3-bid league when you're not SEC or Big Ten is not going to be easy because the ACC is not going to get preferential treatment. But I think Miami, Florida State, and Clemson have the opportunity to earn that throughout the year.
This will be the last question I'll ask, then we'll head out of here because all of the Florida schools right now, just other than maybe UCF,
Yeah.
just seem like they're in an incredibly good place. And it's always been a state that I kind of thought that like not all of them could be good at once, but we went over Miami, Florida State. Florida's got one of the toughest schedules in the country, but I think they're chock full of talent. USF with another incredible upset domination win. Like if it wasn't for the Florida State Alabama thing, that might be one of the games that everyone's talking about now. Like this has to be one of the best times for just all of the colleges in Florida just absolutely thriving.
Yeah, and listen, I know, I'm in Florida, so I don't know if I'm a little biased on this, but I think college football is better when, and it hasn't happened often in recent years, but when Miami, Florida State, Florida especially, and then yeah, I mean, icing on the cake to have USF looked fantastic against Boise State. Like something like that is like a little extra something, but for the big 3 as we call it, Miami, Florida, Florida State, for them to all be good at the same time, I feel like that's when college football is at its best. And then, Notre Dame is also obviously really good these days, which is another one outside of Florida. Like college football is better when Notre Dame is near the top and all that. So I hope that they can keep it up because, yeah, in the state of Florida, there have been a lot of inconsistencies. Miami and Florida for a lot of years didn't do their part. And, Florida State kind of embarrassed Florida last year, but they look really good this year. So, yeah, I think college football is better when all 3 of those teams are good.
Could have a four bid state Four of the 12, all from the state of Florida. It's possible, maybe not, because they might all beat up on each other a little bit, because I think the big three all play, and then I think, does Florida
Well,
play
and
USF?
USF has, like, even for a group of 5 team, they've got a crazy non-conference schedule. Like, they already beat Boise State, who was ranked at the time. USF plays Florida and then Miami in back-to-back weeks. So, I mean, if
What a
they can,
start!
like, if they can, like, come out of that 3-game stretch winning like 2 out of 3, then maybe it's going to be tough for them to stay near the top.
I really like their coaching staff. They've done a
Yeah.
really good job there the last 3 years under Golsh. Alex, this has been great. Do you want to tell us one of the many podcasts that you have and where we can all find them, and then we'll head out of here?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I talk Miami Hurricanes every single day on Locked On Canes. Make sure you check that out wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. I also we talk ACC football and basketball every single day on Locked On ACC. So yeah, that's a good place to start. I do Miami Hurricanes post game shows on 104.3 WQAM, which is the flagship radio station for Hurricanes football. So this time of year, it's all football all the time for me. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you haven't done so already, hit like, leave a comment, what you think about this episode, what you think Miami's hopes are for the rest of the season, what you think about all of the 4 Florida schools, what is their outlook for the rest of the season, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you very much for watching.